I am a descendant member of the tribe called the Colville Confederated Tribes, which is in what we currently call Washington State in the United States. Being an activist is about, it really began with just involvement in local Native communities where I have lived in urban environments. And so being involved with those communities in a lot of different ways ultimately led me into writing. I always knew I was going to be a writer. So my activism really took the form of journalism. Certainly I'm called to it, and I feel like there's nothing else more meaningful for me to do in my life. I have done a lot of different kinds of things, and it took me a while to understand really who I was, and then to have some politics around who I was. And as I got older, I became more clear about it as I learned about my own family history, which is about surviving the boarding schools in the United States. And that was a history that was from me. It was never talked about in our family. And when I learned about it, it was something that it was at a time when there still wasn't a lot of openness about it in the United States. And so I was shocked to learn that my grandmother and my uncles, her siblings, what they had gone through. And they were textbook cases about what American Indian people have survived or experienced in the boarding schools. And that was really pretty much the moment I became politicized, and I was very angry about it. I was very angry that I had never learned that, and it really explained a lot about the family dysfunctions that I had grown up with. So I learned a long time ago that the only way that I was going to ever really be able to heal the anger or to live with the anger, I just learned a long time ago that the only way that I was going to ever really deal with it was to channel my anger about it in a constructive way. And so that's why my life took the path that it did as an activist first, and then as a scholar later. So it's a way for me to just help heal the past. The work that I do is really predominantly around environmental justice, activism and scholarship and theory and policy and law. And the book that I wrote about that has been called a groundbreaking book. And so it's having a major impact in the world of environmental justice scholarship and activism. And so that for me right now feels like a really important achievement in my career or in my work as an activist scholar, because the book is written for a broad audience, and it brings together activism and scholarship and stories and theory and all of this stuff into one book. So that feels so far like my best accomplishment. It's been really hard for somebody like me with the kind of education that I have as an American Indian Studies scholar. It's not something that's easily marketable. So we have this idea that that you go to college so that you can get a job, right? So that you have skills that you can market. That's how we're all trained to think. But for me, it wasn't about that. It was getting skills so that I can keep doing the work that was important to me. I was driven by my passion for that. But getting out of school and moving to an area where there was no market for people with my skills, it was really hard for me to get a job and to make enough money to support myself. And there were years when I couldn't do that, where it wasn't really possible. And so I had to create my own path. I had to learn to do that. I had to learn how to be the kind of writer that that had something to market, but that was also doing what was important to me. And so that was in the world of journalism. And so I had years of obstacles. One of the things that I had to learn to do, and it might be different depending on what kind of career you're thinking of or activism you're doing, you put yourself out there in front of the public. And when you do that, you expose yourself to a lot of criticism. You have to learn to accept criticism, even when it's not fair. When people criticize you or say, you know, they call you names or they try to humiliate you in public, that you learn to let it run off your back. Like you learn to not let it stop you, because it can be really harsh. I mean, I think we all know how harsh social media can be and how damaging that can be, but you have to develop that the ability to not let it get to you. But we live in societies that push us to succeed and to do well. And of course we want to do that, but then that sets us up to feel defeated with failure. And so I think the challenge is to not feel that sense of defeat when you experience failure. I think and it's harder, I think, when you're young to get to get over it, like to get over your failure and your sense of not being good enough, to pick yourself up and then to get back on the horse, get back on the path, whatever metaphor you want to use, and keep going. Like you don't want to just give up. Like that's the thing. You have to draw from really deep inside yourself. And I think one of the ways that we can do this as Indigenous peoples is to remember why we do what we do. And we do it for our ancestors. We do it because we know that on some level they're holding us to it. They are looking at us from somewhere else, some other dimension, and they have faith in us and they're counting on us to help make things right for our people. That's, I think, one of the hardest things to do when you're young, is to not give up and to lose like your faith in yourself and your own ability. You have to persevere, not to be afraid to follow your heart and do what speaks to you. I think this thing about being passionate about what you want to do. Don't just follow what they tell you about. You're supposed to just find a career that is about making money. Like, don't buy that. I mean, that's one way to go, and you could do that, and it might lead you to other things, but don't just think that that's the only option. I've always lived my life by following my heart and my passion. But actually there were times when I didn't. I mean, early on, I took a career that I hated and did it for at least 15 years. And it made me physically sick. The stress from not doing what I wanted to do was really hard on me physically. And I finally quit. There's a point at which in your life you sometimes have to take a leap of faith. And when you're like at a fork on the road and you're like, I could do this or I could do this. One seems like the safer road. The other is less safe, but it's really where your heart is. And I had to learn to do that. I had to learn to not take the safe road, but to take the hard road, but knowing that it was what my soul and my spirit needed to do. And I don't regret it. It's worked for me. And it wasn't easy. Here I am, I'm 62 years old. And so I'm old enough to be able to say with ultimate confidence that that was the right thing for me to do, even though it was really hard at times. You don't hear people when they're dying say, I wish I hadn't followed my heart for my whole life. What you hear people say on their deathbeds is that I should have done what I really wanted to do. I want to be the person that on my deathbed goes peacefully knowing that I did what I was supposed to do in the world, and that my work ultimately made a difference somewhere along the line.